Thanks, friends. I think they got a older description of my profile. I'll just give a quick description in a meanwhile. So before we begin, how many of you are working on workflows already? Few of you. How many of you have heard about workflows? Fantastic. Are you interested to know more about workflows? Yes? Okay, you're in the right room. This is actually a very preliminary talk on the whole philosophy of workflows. What are workflows and why do we need them? Where can we use them? How can they be beneficial? I will show you how to build basic application and workflow foundation. Myself, Bijoy, I work as a developer evangelist. I've been with Microsoft for over 5 years now, and most of my skill set involves development technologies. So I'm passionate about .NET. I talk a lot on .NET, write a lot of code on .NET, and also used to do a lot of VC++ programming. However, don't do that much now, but still whenever get a chance, work on it. So let's get down to the talk. If you look at this picture, what does it remind you of? What does it look like? How many of you have seen any manufacturing process? Does it remind you of some process, some manufacturing process? Yes? So I was actually trying to figure out some sort of a CD, DVD repairing line kind of a thing. I couldn't find a picture, so I just picked up this casual picture which at least looks like a sort of a assembly line. Okay? What are the people on this picture doing? Assembling something, right? So let's take an example of a DVD, CD repairing line. What would people on such a DVD, CD repairing line be doing typically? Let's say all of us have lots of DVDs and CDs, and they get damaged very quickly, scratched or something, okay? Now, if somebody had to open up a factory or an assembly line to repair these DVDs or CDs, what would he or she be doing? Sorry? Let's say scratches, rubs, something like that. Things that can be repaired, not broken or something like that. So what would be happening on such an assembly line? Okay, forget about that. When your CD gets scratched, what do? Wipe it, right? On the shirt, first of all. If that doesn't work, we take some spray, try to wipe it with cotton, right? Okay, you are doing some process. Okay, now let's say if somebody had to build a company around this, what would they do? They would obviously not be repairing 1 or 2 CDs, right? They would be repairing CDs in bulk, thousands, probably hundreds of thousands. So what would they be doing? Sort of a batch process. Wonderful. Hold that thought for a minute. What would happen? Let's say I open up a company, so repairing DVDs and CDs. What will I do? You'll have some box to collect all these CDs. You'll have people sitting in. The first person taking up these CDs, probably inspecting them with the naked eye, seeing what is repairable and what not. If there is a broken DVD or a CD, just throwing it away because it can't be repaired. Okay? Collecting some DVDs, CDs, which he thinks can be repaired, passing it on to the next person. The next person might be first doing a sort of a cleaning, okay, through some liquid or some sort of a lotion, and then passing it on to the next person. Somebody might have some machine to rub it and remove some sort of scratches, or try to buff it like we buff cars and things like that. So some sort of an assembly line which takes these CDs, takes them through a process and finishes it off, right? That's the manual process. Now, if we had to convert this manual process, let's say the company is running fine, it's difficult for me to find people, and I want to automate that whole process, and I want to create a machine that does that for me. What will I do? I'll probably create or ask somebody to build a machine in which I put some DVDs, CDs, it sorts them out, takes those CDs, takes them through the process, same process, right? This time, instead of men or women, the machine is doing that same process. Cleaning them, rubbing them, buffing them, and then finally throwing them out or churning them out, right? Now if you look at this machine, what is happening in this machine? Tell me something about this machine. Earlier, the same thing was happening, people were doing the same thing. Let's take a minute, let's take an example that, the output is also the same. 100 people were giving us 100 DVDs per day. And in this case, this one machine gives us 100 DVDs per day. So it has replaced 100 people. Okay, let's assume that the output is also the same. But what has changed now? Automated, okay. What else? Sorry? Sorry? Predictability, okay. Yeah, people you don't know, somebody falls ill, somebody falls sick, but machine, luckily, we can predict them. Predictability, what else? It's a defined process. Well, process was defined even with human beings. Yeah? What? Duration. You mean efficiency has increased. You're talking about the benefits. I'm looking at something different here. Sorry? We have defined a workflow. How have we defined a workflow? If you look at this particular picture and see, and now let's say if I were to ask you to create this whole thing in software. So first we converted a manual process into an automatic process using a machine, right? Now we have to convert that automatic process into a software-based process. What would you do? Okay, let me ask another question here. What is the advantage of converting this into a software-based process? Is there any advantage or not? So you have a DVD cleaning machine or a DVD repairing machine, and is there an advantage to convert this into a software-based process? Faster. Wonderful point. One is you can monitor or manage it from a remote location. If you've automated, you've reduced the manpower to quite an extent already. I'm not saying it can't be reduced further. Definitely it can be reduced further. Maintenance of the process. Modification. Wonderful. What happens with software? Wonderful. So exactly, bang on target. What is the difference between a machine and software? Sorry, yeah? Reliability. Interface can be more user-friendly. Somebody mentioned a point, manageability. Let's take an example. Okay, let me open up the suspense, and then I'll talk about it. What do you see here? There are some components, right? Some components that make up the whole process. Now, if I were to convert this, or if I had to convert this machine into software, what will I do? I will typically take out these components, right, and represent them in software. I'm not saying that I am converting the manual rubbing process into a software-based process. Okay, it could be a robot-based, it could be a mechanical thing. Whatever is happening is fine. But ultimately, I might be, if I decompose this whole machine and convert it into some small functions or methods and then link them up, what is the advantage I'm getting now? Sorry? You're separating the actions and the instructions and process later on. So let's say now I suddenly figure out that in my whole DVD repairing process, if I introduce one more step of cleaning with a specialized lotion or specialized chemical, then my whole DVD cleaning process becomes much more better. Okay, so what can I do now? I can buy that module that does that cleaning and link it up with my existing thing, right? It becomes much more easier for me to modify my process, change my process, or let's take another example. There is some sort of a coating liquid that I need, okay, where I coat the surface of the DVD. Now, supposing the coating liquid is out of stock, okay, and it's not available in the market, it will take at least 6 days for it to come to my workshop. But I've already put in some DVDs and they are getting cleaned, and the moment they come here, the process stops because the coating liquid is finished. What happens now? What will you do typically? Skip that process. Maybe that's an essential process of the whole thing. If you don't do it, you just can't get the perfect output. You'll wait for the liquid to come, right? Now, if you had a software-based model or a software-based monitoring system somehow, what could you have done? One is that you could have monitored the liquid level. What else? You can control it in the sense you can pause the whole thing, right? You can stop it at that stage till the liquid comes. But if it is a mechanical machine, which you cannot really manage or control, then what happens? You have to restart the process once the liquid arrives. You have to take the DVDs out, start inserting them again, right? You cannot start from that same step. So the advantage of converting certain processes into software-based processes could be immense or huge in a lot of scenarios. Now, we are talking about this particular thing. So you've identified certain components or certain modules inside this whole machine which can be converted into software modules. What do you see here? What are the three basic, or could be more, but what are the basic components of this whole process now? You have certain activities, right? Certain steps, certain activities that you have to do, okay? You have certain connections between the activities. And when you connect the activities, what do you get? A sort of a flowchart, sort of a process map, right? That's the commonality. Earlier, when humans were doing the same thing, they were doing the same thing exactly. When the machine is doing the same thing, machine is also doing the same thing exactly. When software starts to do that, it also does the same thing exactly. The only thing is the mode changes. First it was hands, then it was mechanical. Now it is a software-based or software-controlled mechanical process. Obviously, this kind of a process cannot be completely 100% software-based. So it will be a software-based mechanical process. But now you have actually taken out the control from the machine into software. Okay, you are doing only the exact mechanical thing in a machine. The rest of it is controlled with software. Now, if you look at this kind of an environment, what is this? Or this kind of a, so now let's take an example. Forget about this for a minute. Now I come to you and say, why don't you write a software for, let's say, how many of you were in the first talk today in the morning that I gave on workflows? Okay, we'll take that same example. So if I say, let's automate a process for job applications. Okay, there is a company that is asking people, prospective employees, to apply for jobs. And you have to write a workflow-based system. Forget about workflows for a minute. You have to write a software for that. What will you do? What will be the typical steps in your mind? Come on. Yes? So, accepting the application, one thing. What else? So, once you've got the application, what do you do after that? Sort of screen it, right? Do some sort of a screening on it. Once you've screened it, then what do you do? Possibly some sort of a verification, background check, okay? Possibly employment history check or education check, some sort of thing. And this could be outsourced to an agency, okay? Some agency might be doing it for you and just giving you the result. So you've broken down the whole process into some smaller modules or components. Now once you get these smaller modules and components, what do? You join them, link them, create your whole workflow, okay? So that's what a workflow approach is all about, solving a problem. Now let's talk about the whys, the whats, and the hows of workflow. Now after all of this talk, is it clear why do we need workflows? Or not yet? Not yet? Not really. You automated a process even with a machine. Control. What else? Declarative. That's a wonderful thing. One thing. Declarative. Sorry? Human to software automation. Sorry? Can you define that in one word? Flexibility. Flexibility. Right? It's all about flexibility. You get flexibility. Once you have flexibility, you can re-engineer the process at any time as per your need, depending upon the situation, depending upon the business requirements. What are workflows, or what is this whole approach about? We know we can solve the problem of problem using workflows, but what is the real value of workflows? What are they? Right, absolutely. Long-running transactions can be handled using workflows. Okay, how many of you write code in C#? Every one of you. How many of you know what is base class library? All of us. Yes or no? Yes. What is a base class library? What does it give you? It gives you some pre-packaged APIs, some pre-packaged methods or functions that you can use in your application or in your code, right? What are these APIs doing? They're doing some common activities, some daily necessary activities for a developer, right? And as a developer, you just take those APIs and start using them in your code, right? If, let's suppose, you were asked to, let's suppose, imagine for a minute that you are on the .NET framework programming team and you are writing the base class library, okay? How will you identify methods for a base class library? What methods will you put inside the base class library? Reusable or common methods or utilities or generic methods. There's one abstract methods. Wonderful point. Abstract methods. And what are abstract methods? You will start thinking as a developer who will imagine what are the methods that will help other developers, right? You will think as a developer who has to help other developers. So how do you start thinking now? There's one word for it. You start doing meta thinking, right? What is a meta language? Okay, give me one term with meta. Metadata. What is metadata? Data that defines data, right? So what is it? What do I do with meta? We have metadata, we have a meta language. What is a meta language? A language that defines languages. How many of you have studied computer science? Grammars, syntax analysis. You have something called meta languages there. What does a meta language do? A language that defines other languages. Okay? And similarly, what do we have? What does the term metaprogramming remind you of? So when you are writing an API in the base class library, what are you doing actually? When you are writing an API for the base class library, what are you doing actually? Aren't you doing metaprogramming? Yes or no? Is it complex? I'm not talking about programming, I'm talking about understanding the concept. So what is metaprogramming? Writing programs that will help other programmers? Yes? That's exactly what the workflow approach is all about too. It's a higher level of abstraction wherein you break down the problem into smaller independent units that can be assembled later on. Okay? And why is this important to understand? Why is it important to understand? The reason why I want to elaborate upon this point is because workflows does not mean you take any problem and start solving it. Before you choose the workflow approach, you need to be sure that workflows is the right way to solve this particular problem. Now, how do you identify whether this is the right problem to be solved using a workflow approach or not? Give me some examples. We have already discussed this now. Give me some examples. How will you identify whether a particular problem is the right problem for workflows? Sorry? Should have a series of steps. Every program can have a series of steps. Ultimately, when you are thinking even in terms of procedural or even in terms of, functions or methods, everything is a series of steps. Loosely coupled. Loosely coupled. Okay, that's one point. Sorry? Asynchronous. Absolutely correct. What else? Easy interaction with other systems or connectivity with other systems. Perfectly right. What else? Re-engineered. Whether or not you have a problem that requires frequent re-engineering. Okay? Let's take an example of very simple thing. Taxes. Right? All of us file taxes. I hope so. Well, I'm sure we don't have a choice. So what changes in the taxation process every year? Calculations change, right? They'll change some number somewhere. They'll introduce one additional step somewhere. They'll reduce one step from somewhere, right? But the taxation process overall has to be completed, right? What is changing is one or two steps here or there. Probably the percentage of tax that you have to pay changes. One figure here or there will change, right? But the overall process remains the same. Sometimes they may ask you to do one step earlier and then the other step later on, right? So in such scenarios, if you have an application that does taxation for you, okay, let's take an example that the application does 4 steps. Step A, step 2, step 3, and step 4. And suddenly next year the government changes the rule and says step 4 has to be done after step 2. What do you do now? Sorry? Reorder. How do you do in your code? Let's take an example of your application. What will you do in your code? If these are 4 methods, what you will do is you will call the method 4 before the method 3 or after the method 2. And what will you do? What else will you do apart from changing this call? Recompile and deploy, right? You'll have to recompile and deploy. And now imagine if there is a department, similar thing happens in a department pretty much every day. If there is a department where one value or one process changes every single day, what will you do? As a developer, you will get bored, right? Your job will be only to move this method, recompile and deploy. How long will you be able to do that? Will you enjoy doing that? Yes or no? How many yes? Oh, there is somebody who will enjoy doing it. As a meta programmer, what will you do now? Sorry? Change the methods. Sorry? Depend? Define as a rule. Okay. Okay, wonderful point. You're getting there. Right. Okay, let me just, simplify it. As a meta programmer, you will try to build a program that will help the people define this process automatically. Whenever the process changes, they just go and, probably drag and drop and change it. Right? That's what you'll probably try and do. So that your work of doing that changes every day is removed or simplified. Let's see how do we do this in workflows. So I have this simple application here, and I'll try and be very descriptive about this. I had to write code before because I wouldn't have been able to show the demo in the short span that we have, but I'll try and be very descriptive about this. So I had actually planned for a demo on movie store, but then I changed the theme to make it more simplistic. This is more of an expense processing workflow. So the first thing, now if you have to change, let's say if you are a company where you have to process expense reports, okay, there are some rules to process expense reports, and you have to create a workflow based system for it. What will you do? How will you start thinking about it? Come on, give me some clues. I don't know, assume that I don't know. Product customer type. Okay, you're actually getting into code. Don't even go into the code right now. Think about, an architecture. Okay, first of all, will you or will you not choose workflows for this? Okay, while you are thinking about it, let me first show a very simple. How many of you have never worked in Workflow Foundation or don't know anything about workflows? Okay, let me show you a very simple application of workflow project here. All I'm going to do is create a new workflow project. I'll choose C#, that's the language I'm comfortable with. And you'll see something called workflows here. What I'll do is I'll just create a workflow console application. Simplistic console application. If you look at this, there is some workflow1.xaml here, XAML. Okay, how many of you know the XAML format or what is XAML? Where is it used? Silverlight, right? So this is the same XAML, just that it is used for defining workflows. Now if you look at it, what do I get here? What is it? Some sort of a designer? Let me do one thing. Let me, let's say, drop an activity here. So I have this, I'm trying to draw a flow chart. What I'll do is, after this, I will just add a sequence. Inside the sequence, let's say, I'll say, I'll just connect this here, and let's say inside the sequence also I'll put a if condition, and then say another right line, and here also another right line, and I'll say, let's say if A is equal to 1, let's add a variable here. So I'll say A, variable type int 32, say A equals to 1, and just before this I'll say I'm just keeping it very simple. You can be as innovative and imaginative as you want. And just before this statement, I'll say A equals to, let's say, 1 here. Okay. So what have we done right now? What have we done right now? We have somehow, okay, forget about this. If I have to write an application, a simple console application that checks the value of A and says is 1 or is not 1 and then says finished, what will you do? You'll have an assignment operator, you'll have if condition, you'll have a write line there and then a final write line, right? That's exactly what we have done here. What is the difference in this approach? So if somebody asks you to write that kind of an application, okay, and you choose a workflow for that, is it the right thing? No, right? Why is it not the right thing? So what is the, like, why did I show this example? Simplistic thing, right? 4 things, not a asynchronous process, not a process that needs to be re-engineered or anything for that matter, right? So it's not the right example, but the theme here was to show how can I quickly build a workflow, okay, using Workflow Foundation. I do the same problem solving. The problems could be same, okay? Now, what is it that is happening in this particular thing? What is this particular thing? Some predefined activity, some sequence. This sequence, what does it do? It has 3 activities inside it, okay, or 2 rather. One is an if condition, one is an assignment operator. And then you have another activity which is the write line activity, okay. Now imagine if, coming back to our same example of taxation, in that example, things change very dynamically. Now, if you had to solve that problem using a workflow approach, what would you do as an architect? And make? Can you use that word? Activities. You will break down the problem into smaller components and make activities out of it, okay? Once you have the activities, and if supposing I give you this kind of a designer, wherein you can just drag and drop the activities and attach them and put in some properties, then does it make life easier? Now, even a layman who doesn't know any coding can actually just drag and drop, re-engineer the process and create the whole application, right? Because what did we do? What did we do here? We loosely coupled or decoupled the entire thing, okay? Activities can be assembled. Once you assemble the activities and create your process, then how do you run that process? How does a process get run? Sorry? Link everything and start it. So what do you need for an application to run? When you double click on an application, does every application start running by itself? You need an entry point. Which application has an entry point? exe? Exe files have an entry point, so when you double click on in exe, it starts running, right? It creates a process and runs, okay? You need an entry point for every application to run. Okay? I did not define the entry point here. I did not create the void main or anything for that matter. So where did the entry point come from? Not really start. I could have, so start does not create the entry point. I can remove the start and still have the entry point. Where does it come from? Not really. Actually, the workflow foundation or the workflow runtime provides a runtime. Workflows provide a runtime for any workflow to be hosted within that. And the whole process is automatically created for you. And that's one of the advantages. So Workflow Foundation provides you, one, with the ability to create activities, another, to a designer to create these activities or create workflows out of these activities, and third, a very important thing, it provides you a runtime wherein your workflows can be hosted and executed automatically. So you don't have to worry about the environment. Okay, you can dynamically create workflows. You can create workflows in XAML. You can store them. You can serialize them. You can load it into a process. You can change them dynamically. Lot of things, because of being loosely coupled, become possible now. Let's go to this expense activities thing, okay, or the expense filing report. Now tell me one thing. Let's take the same example. Let's assume that we have 3 verification processes before the expense report is verified. What will you do? What will you do? Not 3 workflows, something else. 3 activities. We'll create 3 activities. So what do I do? The first thing I did in this application was, I'll just show it to you. I won't be doing everything right now. The first thing I do is I create a activity library. Okay, I created the activity library. In my case, it's called expense activities. The activity library contains all the activities that my process or that my workflow may need. Okay, so this is just a library of activities, nothing else. You can decompose your application into smaller activities and start creating activities here. So let's look at the first activity. So I have this first activity called amount verification. Let me reduce this so that probably it will fit in one screen. Okay, it's a little too big to be visible here. But okay, let's look at the first thing is what? The sequence. I dragged and dropped a sequence. Then I just dragged and dropped the if condition. Here in this particular thing, what I have done is I've defined some arguments. Now, if you have a workflow or if you have an activity, what are the 2 things that an activity has always? Sorry? Input and output. Bingo. So you have to define an input and you have to define an output. It takes something, does something on that input and gives you an output. So in this particular case, what am I defining here? I'm taking 2 inputs, which is amount and currency, and giving an output, which is the status. So I have this amount verification process, and the amount verification is if the amount is less than 0, less than or equal to 0, then you have entered an invalid amount. I just say the amount status is invalid. If that is not the case, then I check. If the currency is anything other than Indian rupees, I say you need a manager approval. If the currency is in Indian rupees, then I say, okay, if the amount is greater than 5,000, you need a manager approval. If the amount is not greater than 5,000 and in Indian rupees, then the status is verified. Right? Now I'm hard coding all these things right now, but typically you wouldn't do that. You would get these from database, or you would get these from some XML file or some INI file. To keep it simple, we are just hard coding it right now. So what have we done right now? Sorry? Defined an activity with 1 input, 1 output. Okay? Those are the arguments to the, 2 inputs and 1 output in this particular case. So now we are done with the amount verification activity. The second thing, similarly, we define a bill verification activity. Now the bill verification activity does a little bit different thing. It compares the date of the submission. Okay? If the date is not is greater than now, which means how did you do an how do you have an expense that you have not yet done. Similarly, it does some other verifications. Here I have in bill date, in bill number, and then the out bill status. Similarly, put in some logic here, and based on that, it says bill post dated, bill number invalid, or it says bill verified. Okay? Similarly, I define another activity, which is the eligibility verification. Now in this particular case, what am I doing? I have a switch statement wherein I am verifying the designation and saying, okay, if it is manager and the total expense is less than a lakh, eligibility verified, not eligible, whatever is the logic. Similarly for a director, similarly for an evangelist, and finally, that's it. I'm done with the defining the logic for this particular activity. Okay, now once I have done all of these and I build this, okay, let's assume that It should build fine. I haven't changed anything, so. Okay. I hate this resolution, but I don't have a choice. They are forcing me to use this resolution. Okay, so there is no error here, so everything is fine. Let's see, what do we do now? Now, once we have defined the activities, what happens? Where do you see these activities? You see these activities here? Amount verification, bill verification, and the, I don't know why the eligibility verification didn't compile. Okay, I might have removed it from the project for now, but don't worry about that. So we get the activities, the expense activities here in the toolbox. Now, one more thing that we have to do is, we have to define the structure of our expense report, right? We will be processing something, so we will just create a small class which has certain parameters, an amount, currency, a bill date, a bill number, a designation, and just say get set whatever it is, okay? And once we have done this, now what do we need to do? Now we have to create the actual workflow where our processing will start happening. So how do we do that? I create a workflow here in a separate project, which is going to be our client project. This is nothing but a console application again. So how I added it was by adding a new project, which is a workflow console application. Okay. Let's open the workflow. And to keep it simple, what I'll do is I'll just delete the whole thing. Okay. Now you see the activities here. What should we do now? We have three activities which verify the amount, which verify the bill, and which verify the eligibility. So we want to write a simple application that will do something with these three things. So what do we do first? Drag and drop a sequence here, okay, because we need to do more than one process, so we'll drag and drop a sequence here. Another interesting thing that I want to do now is do a parallel activity, okay, and inside the parallel activity, what I'll do is I will add amount verification, okay, and what will I do? A bill verification. Okay, and finally what I'll do here is, what should I do towards the end? Some status or something, right? So I need to do that. What else do I need to do here? What else do I need to do here? Or so I need to define the arguments. Again, what is a workflow? It will take something, it will do a set of activities on that particular object or that particular entity and give me the result. So what does a workflow need to have? An input and an output. So here I have an out expense report status and an in expense report. The direction is out and in respectively here. The expense type, the report, the type of the argument for the in report is what? Expense report. What is expense report? Where do we get this expense report from? From our class called expense report. Okay, that's a type in our application. So that's the definition of this thing. Now what do we need to do here? Inside amount verification, what will I do? You see the variables here on the right hand side, in amount, in currency, out amount status? Yes? So what do I do here? in expense report dot amount. Okay. What should come here? In expense report dot currency. Okay, and out amount status. What is this? Sorry? What is the out amount status? It is the output of amount verification, right? So I create another variable where I will store this value. The output type is what? String. So I'll just put that here. Okay, and let's say right line text. What do I do here? Out. Okay, I'll come to that in a while. Let's finish the bill verification also. So here what will happen? In expense report dot bill date. Similarly here what will we have? In expense report dot bill number, right? And similarly out exp rep, out bill state, just to keep it bill stat, and let me define this here inside variables. Okay, so far so good. Here let's say what I'll do is I'll put an if condition here before this. And inside the, what will I verify? If what was the, because bill because this is hard coded, I'll just need to go back and check. Okay, bill verified. Ideally, it shouldn't have asked for, okay, why am I, okay, and here I'll say right line bill, and similarly here I'll say did I define that value here? Out bill status, out bill status, scope, sequence, scope, sequence. Okay, looks fine now, I think. Sorry? Oh, okay, okay. Could be the reason. Just give me a second. This takes VB expressions, so I think that should not be the problem here. Okay. Now let's go back to the sequence. Looks fine now. Yes? Okay. So what do you think is going to happen now when I execute this project? Before I execute this project, I need to do a little bit of more work, which is create an instance of the expense report, assign some values to it, okay, and finally invoke my workflow from here. This is pretty much the most important part of the application, wherein I'm creating an instance of the workflow and passing it some values. So what am I passing here in this particular case? The in expense report. What is the in expense report? It's just an array of expense report. So in our particular case, because there is only one, I'm just passing one. And how do I take the output? So I have defined this out expense report status. Where is it defined? Where is it defined, the output variable? Inside the workflow. Where is it? Okay. I have not assigned the value here. Ideally what I should be doing is, if bill verified, then I should be saying out expense report status is equal to whatever it is. But for simplicity, I'm just writing it here on the console itself. So now let's go ahead and execute this. Build it. Build succeeded. Let's go and start an instance. I hope I didn't miss on something here. Okay, so we can debug all of these things. There are certain breakpoints that I had previously put. So they are here, but I'll remove them for now. Where are you getting this output from? Inside the workflow. I hadn't taken the value back into the main parameter. Otherwise, you can wire the value back to the main output argument of the activity. So what is this? Now what have I done? What is the advantage of this whole thing? Do you see any advantage here or not? I could have been wrong, right? I could have shown you a demo. I could have talked about something that really doesn't make sense. So think critically. What is the advantage? Do you see any advantage here? Sorry? Wonderful point. If I had to do that parallel thing, verify the bill and verify the amount in parallel in regular code, how much code would I have to write for that? Significant amount of code, right? Significant amount of code. And the thing is, I don't know always whether my activities will be parallel or not, or would it be possible to do them in parallel or not. But with workflows or workflow foundation, what happens is, because all my activities are separate, if I see that there is no dependency of this activity on any other activity, I can do them in parallel. I can process them in parallel. Now, if I have to add some more thing here, let's take an example of the third activity. What do I have to do actually? I just have to drag and drop and let's say put it here. Put this activity here and wire it up. Right? So I can compose my whole system using these activities and dynamically changing their order or flow or wiring them up. There are lots of, now one of the things is, okay, we did this, but we still need Visual Studio. I am a developer. I open this up in an environment and build all of these things. Now the advantage with Workflow Foundation is this designer that you see here, this particular thing, this whole window, that is a re-hostable designer. So I can create a separate application inside which I have only my activities and this designer, which allows any layman who's not technical, not a developer, to drag and drop these activities and wire them up and create his whole business flow inside it. Okay? Now start thinking of the taxation thing. If you have that kind of a problem, and if you create an application which just gives you all the activities that a tax department needs, okay, and you give a designer to, let's say, a finance department or anybody, okay, and tell them, whenever there is any change, I am not an expert on tax. I built an application for you which you can use and just wire them up, or drag and drop the controls and order them up as per your requirement, and your application will run. Because you don't have to recompile it. The host is provided by the Workflow Foundation. The designer is provided by the Workflow Foundation. And then you have the activities that you have created. I will just quickly recap one slide. So, is it clear the why, the what, and the how of workflows? Why do we need workflows? What are workflows, and how do you create workflows? This is fine. I'll just go to one slide which is important, a little important in my opinion. It is this one. So you have the workflow, which is composed of activities. Outside of it, you have the host process. What was the host process in our case? The console application. Okay? You can create your own custom libraries and package them and give it to anybody. You can have all of these things out of the box available using Workflow Foundation, which is the base activity library. So there are certain activities that come pre-packaged with Workflow Foundation. You have a runtime engine, and finally you have certain runtime services. Runtime services include, services for persistence, services for authentication, services for logging, and things like that. And finally, the visual designer is rehostable, so you can put it in any application. It's not that only Visual Studio has to be used for all of these things. Lots of scenarios where workflows can actually be used and implemented. Any scenario that you think is very, very compelling for workflows? How many of you heard workflows or saw workflows for the first time? So do you think there is an example or a thought in your mind or a scenario in your mind which you can implement using workflows? Yes. Bidding process, fantastic idea. What else? Loan management, financial application management. Yes, please. Absolutely. So wherever you have things that can be loosely coupled, that need frequent re-engineering, where little things change very frequently, where you are not a domain expert on certain things, okay? You can build systems using the workflow-based approach. That's it, friends. Thank you so much. I'm open to questions now. Yes? Absolutely. All of the communication that happens in Workflow Foundation is asynchronous. So if you actually saw, the reason why I put parallel was exactly because of that. So you can have those two things happening at the same time. Yes, please. Yeah, sure. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
Is it the left branch, right branch?
Okay, wonderful question. Now that's more of a question related to parallel programming. If you look at any parallel programming thing, first of all, the order is not defined. Excuse me. Because each of the parallel processes will be put onto a different thread, and that will be done by the system automatically. So not all processes can be parallel. You have to make sure that whatever application you have is the right candidate for parallel processing. One. The other thing is, once you have created a parallel application or parallelized operations in it, the time when each of these parallel operations will finish is not in your hands. Okay? They may finish early, some may finish later on. So if they are totally independent of each other, okay, it really doesn't matter for you. But if there is a dependency of one on the other, or if you have to use the results of both of these together, then you'll have to put a weight somewhere to get them. Okay? So ideally what people do is, couple of ways you can handle this issue or this type of an architecture, wherein you parallelize all the operations and then you persist them or store them and let your workflow shut down. And then when all the operations are complete, you revive you pick up the values from the store and then do the further processing. Or what you can do is, you can, if you can optimally parallelize them such that all the operations happen pretty much at the same time.
But is there any kind